Hello, guys. Welcome to Exploring Light once again. And after a long hiatus, we are back with our extra byte session. And this time we have some special guests, and we get to talk about the newly promoted Natural Landscape Photography Awards. Uh, but before we meet our elite guests, let me just quickly introduce you to our panelists, whom you know very well. We've got Atanu Bandopadhyay from the US, and we've got Himadri Bhuyan from the Northeast. And of course, I'm Sandeep Mathur. I'm a landscape photographer and a cityscape photographer from Delhi. Moving on very quickly to our elite guests, we've got firstly Tim Parkin. Tim Parkin
Hi.
is the founder and editor of On Landscape magazine, now in its 250th issue, if my facts are right. He's also been a judge over 20 times for various competitions, including the UK Landscape Photographer of the Year, the International Landscape Photographer of the Year, the Environmental Photographer of the Year. He's also a consultant for Wildlife Photographer of the Year in Rule Development and Image Authenticity. Checking his own photography is a mix of digital and large format film, and he also runs a drum scanning business and offers a darkroom service for hybrid printing. But I urge you guys, whoever is watching this, to go to Tim's page and look at his catch line. His catch line reads, Tim Parkin, still developing. And I love that line, Tim. It's such a wonderful, wonderful sense. It's the typical British humor. There's humility in it, and there is, I love that line. Next, of course, we have Alex Nail. Alex is somebody I followed for a number of years. Alex is a landscape photographer with a love of multi-day backpacking in mountainous areas. He's best known for his work in the Northwest Highlands of Scotland, Iceland, and the Drakensberg area of South Africa. He runs adventurous photography workshops, usually involving camping in remote locations. He's a qualified mountain leader and was awarded a fellowship of the Royal Photographic Society. You must tell us a little bit about that, Alex, when we get down to it.
Cool.
But I would urge everybody to have a look at Alex's YouTube channel. He has some great tutorials on photography and Photoshop and Lightroom. And what strikes me most about his YouTube channel is the simplicity and the easy way he explains everything. I love your channel, Alex. I keep going back to it time and again.
Thanks very much. That's very kind of you to say.
Moving on, Rajesh is somebody everybody knows in our group. He's a moderator in Exploring Light. He's a landscape photographer based in Texas. His interests range from macro to astrophotography, particularly in the rarely photographed places. So if there's a photograph you see which you have not seen before, or a location that you've not seen before, trust me, it's going to be Rajesh. His photography career began with a love for horticulture and landscaping with Texas native plants. His artistic philosophy is to represent the scene accurately so that the viewer can share the experience. His images have been published in magazines and displayed at several exhibitions, including London's Royal Botanic Gardens Kew. Rajesh joins the Natural Landscape Photography Awards on the back of entering and being awarded in numerous competitions himself, and it's his experience of the competition circuit that has motivated him to create an alternative. And lastly, and not the least, Matt Payne, our very own Matt, who's been on Exploring Light before, is a landscape photographer living in Colorado, USA. Much of his photography is focused on lifelong goal to climb the 100 highest mountains in Colorado. And in my book, that alone makes him a god. And from somebody who's climbed probably 2 mountains in his lifetime, 100 is something that we are never going to achieve. Matt is also a co-founder of the Nature's First Photography Alliance. Matt hosts a weekly podcast dedicated to landscape photography called the F-Stop Collaborate and Listen, where he has meaningful conversations with other landscape photographers all over the world. It's also through his podcast that he's heard a range of perspectives, and on post-processing, his views have gradually moved towards a strong preference for promoting realistic images. We'll talk a little bit about that, Matt. But
thank you.
I would like to set the ball rolling by starting to ask you the fundamental question about this podcast. The first question is, this is two parts. The first question, of course, is to clarify once that you guys are the creators of Natural Landscape Photography Awards. You're not going to judge them, right? And the second part of this question is, did we really need another competition? There are so many competitions out there. Why have you made another?
You
Tim,
want to
I think
tackle
you're
that,
up.
Tim?
Okay, yeah. I'll answer the second question first, is why do we really need another competition? And you could say no. I mean, how many competitions are there out there? I struggled to find them all when I was doing my research. One thing I did find, though, was that there are very few competitions now that are being rigorous in checking for the authenticity of files. Now, I've worked for the Wildlife Photographer of the Year competition, which is based out of the Natural History Museum in London, over the last 10 years, I think. And one of the processes there is to ensure that the images portray and represent the wildlife and the landscape in a way that doesn't deceive the viewer, so that they can appreciate the photographs for their artistic merit, but also for what is being photographed. And the Wildlife Photographer of the Year also used to have a landscape category, but unfortunately they stopped having a landscape category last year. And that's when I started thinking about, well, if that was the only one really that was landscape oriented, that was checked rigorously and looked at the raw files, perhaps there's a space there for another one, being as nearly all of the other competitions allow an anything goes attitude to some extent. And I spoke with Alex about this, and Alex mentioned that Matt, who we get to write for us occasionally in our magazine, was interested in something as well. So we had a chat about it. So I think there's definitely space here for something, especially seeing the reaction we've had to the competition, which has been excellent. There's been lots and lots of support and people saying, yes, it's great, there's space for it and it's a good time to do it. And on the other side of things, which is, are we judging it? That's a yes and a no answer. In most competitions where you may have 40, I don't know, let's say 40,000 or 50,000, or even the Wildlife Photographer of the Year has up to 80,000 pictures. With the level of judges we're trying to get involved with, William Neal and Joe Cornish, they don't have the time to go through every single image. So what we're looking at is, by trying to reduce the number of images through our process of the way we've worked with competitions, we've worked with photographers before, to a number that they can judge within a certain time frame. Now, each of those judges are also, they're going to be invited to take a look at the Lightroom catalogue and see if there's anything that jumps out that they'd like to include. And what we'd like to hope is that with the four of us looking at every single image, we shouldn't miss on anything that has real potential to end up in the book. So I hope that answers both of the questions.
Thank you for that, Tim. So who exactly is this competition for? What kind of photographers?
I think I can have a...
Go ahead, Alex. Do it.
Yeah, I can have a crack at that one. I mean, I think, we're at risk of saying that everybody loves to composite their images, and there's nobody who this competition is for, but actually I think it's for everyone, which of course is a good marketing strategy on our part. But I think even those who have done taken editing approaches in the past that wouldn't be permitted by our rules, that wouldn't get through our checking process, still regularly produce images that absolutely we would accept. And in fact, all of us have taken some of those approaches which we're not allowing in the past or even currently, and so have our judges. So we're not out on a witch hunt to attack people who take those approaches, but what we want to do is encourage everybody to produce the kind of photography that we love. And I think that that's a huge proportion of landscape photographers. I think there's very few who would be who would say, no, we don't take any photos where we don't break the rules. So I think it really is for everyone. Yeah, we're just hoping that we can introduce that positivity towards this approach as well, because it can seem like a very negative, elitist, oh no, you can't do that, that's not good enough for us kind of thing. And we want to completely step away from that and just say, look, here's a place that really celebrates the style of landscape photography that we love.
You've answered the question that I was going to ask you next, and which is really, some people would wonder if this competition has been created to eliminate or to dissuade people who are into graphic art or doing a lot of Photoshop to their landscape images. Would you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think as a group, we've often discussed this issue. It's very contentious. And I think the goal has always been that we just get people to recognize the real power of creating realistic photographs. I mean, you'll hear all of us harp on about this over and over again, but the ability of taking a photo and planting the viewer in that exact position is incredibly powerful. It makes photography infinitely more meaningful. And by removing that doubt, the kind of doubt that can be introduced by compositing images. I mean, I'm sure everybody here has had somebody look at your photo and say, it's Photoshop, it was never anything like that. And of course, that's quite dispiriting. It does dilute some of the ideas that we pursue as photographers to engage people with nature broadly, to get them excited about the natural world. And also there's a conservation angle as well. So there's a huge number of benefits. And I've kind of actually lost the thread of what your original question was. But
no, you're doing quite well. That was really my point. That is this to draw a line between graphic art, where people composite things that are not there, or shoot, for example, a Milky Way in a position that you would not see, you would not actually see. So is this against those people? That was the question.
Yeah, I'll let Matt take up the mantle here, I think.
Yeah, I'll give it my best, and I'll keep an eye on Alex to see if I've gone out of bounds. But I don't believe that we're trying to say that that kind of photography is bad. I think what we are trying to say is that there's a difference between that style of photography and the style of photography that we're trying to elevate and promote and give credence to, and to provide a platform for, and to celebrate through this competition. I think, there's been lots and lots of back and forth in the landscape photography community about whether or not you should, call different styles of photography digital art versus fine art versus landscape versus nature. I don't think we're necessarily trying to do anything like that, but what we are trying to do is to say that we want to kind of have an even playing field in terms of, these are the standards that we want to set for this style of landscape photography that more naturally represents what you could actually experience. I think for the four of us, that's really born out of our mutual love for the experiences that we have in nature, and that we love the fact that when we look at some photography, that it can take us through those experiences that somebody else had. And without these types of rules in place, it's really hard for someone like me to be able to do that. I can't fairly look at an image and say, oh, that looks like something I could experience, and I would love to do that. And that's important to me. And that's the type of imagery that we really want to promote.
I think
add
also
something to it. Sorry, go ahead, Tim.
I was going to say that part of this goes back to when we may look at things like the National Geographic magazines and look at the pictures by the journalists and some of the artists in there, and you'd trust the magazine, or you'd trust the photographs to really represent. So what you're seeing is a real moment, and the same with the Sierra Club magazines. And I think it's really just a continuation of that trust process. When you buy a National Geographic, you have a trust that what you're seeing is something that is trustworthy, and the same goes hopefully for the competition. Sorry, Rajesh?
No, I was just going to go completely off tangent here and not speak in intellectual terms like you all did, but our audience over here in Exploring Light and the folks that are watching it probably can relate to what I'm going to say. So right now the IPL is going on in India, right? Like big bam, boom, boom, bash, bash, cricket, right? So imagine a player like Rahul Dravid playing in the IPL, or like, even Cheteshwar Pujara, for example, like, they struggle, right? That doesn't make them bad players. They have a skill and they are really good at what they do. It's just a different format. So this is like for the lack of a better analogy, this is like a test match World Cup, right? So where people that have real technical skills, real cricket talent can show their wares and be the best of the best. That doesn't mean that they cannot play in the IPL. They can definitely play in the IPL, but this is a way to promote the real cricket, right? The real photography, or something that stays real to the eyewitness tradition.
Rajesh, a lot of people are going to argue with you on what is real cricket, but nicely put with the cricket analogy. And
you won't get any arguments from me because I know nothing about it.
Yeah. Well, cricket is more of a religion here rather than a sport. And
I think in mountaineering terms, like Matt, the Meissner proposed the idea of climbing Everest without oxygens and without all the gears, right? Is it something more like that, you would say?
I don't know. Without trying to be too controversial, to some degree, we are talking about a competition here, right? And I think one thing to keep in mind, I think that's really fundamental to human psychology and art, is that whether or not you think you're having a competition or not with your artwork, I think you are, if you want people to see it. For example, if you want to have a gallery or somewhere exhibit your work, you're competing against everybody else who is presenting that work to that gallery. And so what we're trying to say is that we want to elevate the type of work that's on the same playing field, and that everyone who's participating in that competition knows what that playing field is.
Yeah, definitely. Agreed.
so, Tim, this question is for you. Referring to your experience where you offer darkroom services and you've been in hybrid printing and large format film photography, is that something that you encourage for your competition?
Definitely, yes. And we've just been preparing some video clips of what sort of post-processing we allow, and sometimes it's interesting with large format and film photography that people think, well, people don't do any editing to film photographs, when in reality, you can or can't do as much editing as you want. If we look at a lot of the Hollywood movies that come out, most of those are shot on film and then scanned in and then edited extensively and composited, maybe, if it's that type of film. So there shouldn't be any boundary that says things are either digital or film. However, I know that some of our judges, people like William Neal and Joe Cornish, have started in film and some of their work has been exceptional. And there is something, and maybe some of my attitude towards the process comes from seeing a slide, a large format Velvia 50 slide straight out of camera, and it looking magnificent, and knowing I'm seeing the photons that have arrived on the film being converted into new light and color. So we want to see as much film as possible entered, and we've had interest from some film photographers who I think one of them that we may have talked to about being a judge possibly has said, I know I want to enter it. So that would be good.
Atanu, Himadri, any questions from your side?
It's not a question, but what I'd like to say is, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. So what I'd like to say is, what you have mentioned, I'm very much interested in doing that, because the image that you see behind me, the image of the lightning, that's a single shot. But in several locations, I have tried to go to that location, and then I have tried to shoot during a storm or just before a storm passes through that location, but I haven't been successful enough. So in that context, I would very much want to composite it, but then that is for my self-satisfaction, and that is not to show it to people. When it comes to showing it to people, then I'd very much be interested in showing it as it is from the location. So I'm very much interested in your like award, and I'd say that there is a huge group of people or huge chunk of people who would be interested in being a part of it, because because not many in my circuit, they have the resources to process their images.
In a way, it democratizes the ability for people to create images. It levels the playing field,
right?
Because it doesn't mean that if you're a good Photoshop artist and you've got all the latest software that you have an advantage. Really, it's all about essentially what you do with your camera, where you go, how many times you go to try and get the right moment.
Right.
And I know many Instagram photographs and Facebook photographs become very popular because of a juxtaposition, a certain timing of events, maybe like a lightning stroke versus, I don't know, something flying past, or a storm over a castle, etc. And those moments are hard fought for. You go back again and again until you get the right light in the right place. And if you can artificially create that juxtaposition or create the moment, it really trivializes the process of being a photographer, of having that hunt for the right moment and the right light. And I like that. I like the fact that it gives each person who can make the effort a chance to have their own expressive moment.
Yep.
Absolutely.
I like what you said, Tim, because in a way, what we're saying is we're kind of making a stand in terms of what we want to reward, and what we want to reward is composition, effort, and natural ability to capture scenes the way that people experience them. And I think what we've increasingly seen especially in landscape photography over the years, is what's been rewarded is people's ability to create in Photoshop whatever it is they want to present, which is not a bad thing, but it's different. It's not the same skill set. It's not the same type of photography. So I like what you said, Tim.
Also, to add to that, we'll be looking for originality, right? Like, a lot of images that do well in competitions are images that have been shot of familiar locations. Like, if you scroll through a lot of the previous winners, you'll see the same kind of images, like, oh, I've seen this in 2017, I've seen this in 2018. You're seeing, we'll be looking to see images beyond that, something that is unique, something that the photographer experienced.
And that icon chasing, the people trying to get the same photograph, creates an incredible amount of impact on the places as well. Some of these very popular locations are getting quite severely damaged because of it. And if we can try and promote people to go and find their own locations or find alternative viewpoints, it may help.
That's a very dear topic to Matt. And Matt, you talked about that extensively on your recent podcast with the Irish landscape photography.
Yeah, and I actually recently, actually yesterday, recorded with a photographer she's Native American woman, and she judges a ton of competitions around the world. And something she said to me really struck me. Her perspective as a judge is she wants to see photography that's trying to say something, that has a voice, that's not just a pretty picture from a popular place, that's done technically well with good processing. And I think that there's a lot of what we're trying to say with our competition is the type of photography we want to see is something more than just a popular location that's processed nicely.
And we should probably mention the portfolio section in the competition as well, because quite often it's difficult to say something with a single image. I mean, we all love the single image and how powerful it can be. But it's very true that sometimes you come across photographers who can put together a book or a project or an exhibition with a topic or a location that they are been working in, and seeing the images together makes each one stronger. So some of the images may not work on their own, but put together as a whole, they make a body of work. And so we've included a section in the competition dedicated to groups of photographs. So you can decide to enter between 6 and 10 photographs on a topic, give a description of why they are important to the topic or what relation they are to each other. And we'll judge those as a separate part of the competition. And I'm quite interested in what we get there and what topics people choose.
So you're allowing a photographer to present a story.
Yes, essentially.
You have a story and you can describe it by 4, 5 or 6 photographs. That's a great idea.
And quite often those photographs don't have to be individually incredible visually. They can just, if they put together, make a really strong and compelling story about maybe the environment and maybe the way somebody's backyard is developing, or then that can be very powerful. And it's very difficult to get that message across in single pictures. So we're quite excited about how that could work.
Yeah, one of the examples I can give is, like I was talking to somebody who expressed interest in this kind of, the portfolio. And I told him that the example that we have on our website is the one that Tim has of a quarry. So it's not like a very famous location or something like that. For example, in Meghalaya, if you guys are familiar with the root bridges, the tree root bridges, that could be a good subject, right? Also the seasonal waterfalls that you guys get, beautiful waterfalls, but maybe they are in threat of some environmental damage because a lot of people are visiting them and trampling them. So that could be a nice subject too. So you don't need to go too far. If it's in your backyard, you can do it.
There's a photographer friend of ours called Theo Bosboom who did a project on Icelandic tourists and the impact they have on the environment, which was fantastic. So he would show some of the iconic locations, but from a tourist point of view. So they don't have to be the classically landscape images to tell a good story. I
think Himadri, Rajesh was referring to you. So that is a very clear indication of what he expects you to do. With the root bridges and the waterfalls, the seasonal waterfalls, that's really up your street.
I already have them. If you want, I can send them over. Let me be the first participant.
You should be the first participant. Exactly. Exactly. Telling the story. Okay.
The story idea I think really, really nice. Like, this West Coast and everywhere pretty much in US, like they're facing that. Every location they're facing that tantalizing amount of pressure of tourists and photographer and whatnot, right? Like, for an example, a waterfall in Oregon, they probably sees 1,000 cars going their parking lot, trampling the vegetations and going to the trails and destroying water bottles and whatnot, right? And the worst part is that we, the photographer, are part of that. Like, we are not outside of that problem. We are part of the problem, right? So I think that's a great subject of, portraying that, what a story can present to landscapes in general, right? So that has a lot of potential, and that's a great idea to include that in the competition. And it's a very nice topic to have it there. Absolutely.
One thing I was going to add is that we also have kind of clearly defined our categories. So we have a grand landscape category, we have an abstract, intimate landscape category, we have an aerial category, and we have a night photography category. And the reason why we did that is that what I think we've started to see in a lot of competitions is, aerial photography especially is kind of dominating competitions. And I own a drone myself, and I love the perspectives you can get with drones, and or flying in an airplane or helicopter. It's pretty fantastic. However, I think it's a pretty easy case to make that's a different style of image making. That's it's pretty hard to say that you don't have a pretty clear advantage over someone who doesn't do aerial work. So we wanted to make sure that it was clear that we value aerial photography, and we've created a whole category for people to enter in. But we're probably not going to give the Landscape Photographer of the Year award to someone who just submits all aerial images, if I were to put money on it. But who knows what the judges will think.
Right. Yep. I mean, this year, Landscape Photographer of the Year, like Il-Poti, it had most of it dominated by the aerial photography in there, in the award section, right? So that's definitely a valid point. Totally agree.
So I think this is something to do with what we've been just discussing, and it's a bit of an open question. But what kind of a photographer would you personally like to see winning a competition like this?
A very good question, isn't it? Well, I can say that one of my main goals for this as a photographer myself and running the On Landscape magazine was to try to. I've always wanted to curate exhibitions. I'd love to have my own gallery. I'd love to be able to go out and say, I'm going to put on an exhibition of 100 photographs from my favorite photographers. It's never going to happen. I'm not going to, unless I land on a few £1 million. And so the closest idea I could get to that was maybe publishing a book of some of my favorite photographs. And that's really one of the things I'm most excited about with the competition is not the individual winner, but to create a body of work. And hopefully, if we get enough entries, we're going to produce a fine art landscape photography book, showcasing maybe I think 100 to 120 of the best images across the categories. And that for me is going to be the most exciting thing. And I'm hoping we get a real wide range of pictures that we don't see everything from Patagonia and Iceland. We really do get a broad array of locations and styles, and something that people will be interested in browsing. And one of the things I wanted to add to that in the book, and we've talked about, is to have more stories in the book. So each judge will be choosing their favorite few photographs, and they'll write why they like them. And then we may get some guest writers to write a little bit about landscape photography. And so that I think is one of the exciting things. In a way, the competition is just a curation process. It's a way of choosing the images that are going to be in this showcase book. And that's I think, my most exciting aspect of the competition.
I think Tim's far too diplomatic. I'll have a go at saying what kind of photographer I'd like to see.
Go on then.
Yeah, Joe Cornish, he's one of the judges. He's a photographer who I've looked up to ever since I started, and he's a photographer who relatively few people know about anymore because he doesn't do the social media game. And I would love to find the next Joe Cornish. I would love to find somebody who's got a real finesse for composition like that. I think that's something that is lacking a little bit in landscape photography now, because we're quite often focused on effect and impact. And Joe was somebody who had a real command of shooting, making the most of the conditions that he was photographing in, often making sense of incredibly complex subject matter. A good example might be a field of broken scree, broken rocks on a mountaintop, and somehow bringing all these awkward broken shapes into a coherent composition. He was absolutely brilliant at that, and that comes from a lifetime of practice, but absolute dedication to composition. And I'd love to see somebody of that kind of caliber win, or just taking that kind of approach. Just I love grand landscapes. I mean, as much as grand landscapes often win photography competitions, I think beautiful grand landscapes are an amazing aspect of our medium. But I suspect with our judges, we're also going to see a massive thrust towards the intimate landscapes, which is going to be really exciting to see as well. And there's certainly a lot of that work that I really enjoy.
In other words, we'd like to see somebody with a really good body of work, when not just like a spectacular image or two. Also, I think, like, the purposes of this competition, like, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, we want to see people look back and say the National Landscape Photography Awards put the nature back in the landscape images. Like right now, there's a lot of imagery that you see less of nature, more of bombastic, fantastical images. So this, we think, would be a pivotal moment to change the direction towards something, bringing back some sanities, bringing back some quietness to our images.
And it is true that people use previous competition winners to decide what they're going to enter, or what their image of what a great photograph is. And if all the previous competition winners that they're using as a model are incredible, and what bombastic, wow, aerials with aurora and Milky Ways, etc., that's going to be the type of image that they want to produce. And I'm hoping that by having a competition that will show a different emphasis, maybe people look at it and go, that's what we need to do to be able to get the attention in this type of environment. And it is, I mean, there is a certain aspect of the way the competition, we've made the judging really important, the caliber of the judges, and the fact that they're all working photographers with a good experience of the types of work that are out there. That's really important, because it's the judging process that really decides everything. And there are so many competitions out there where the judges aren't landscape photographers, for instance. And it's like asking a jazz competition to be judged by a plumber and a woodworker. You need to have specialized knowledge about the type of work you're judging, I think. So hopefully.
It's kind of funny that you brought that up, Tim, actually. That this actually came up last week, and I'll tell you guys, this is not public yet, but I entered a competition. I still do PPA. So I submit one of my recent images, and which I haven't shared yet. It's a Milky Way picture with the blue bonnet flowers, and I want to say the judges had no clue, because they're all portrait shooters. The kind of questions that they were asking, or comments they were making, is this supposed to be day or night? You don't see stars in the daytime. Like, that's the problem with a lot of competitions. The judges are not really familiar with the topic. They're not experts, but our judges, all of them, are experts in nature and landscape photography. They are the best of the best. So that's another big difference that we are making through this competition.
And it's true that landscape photography has its own knowledge about how things work and what's important and what isn't. It's like a domain knowledge that if you're not a landscape photographer, you may not understand what's important, or what's difficult, what's easy, how you can use the landscape. And if you get people who all are landscape photographs, hopefully they will understand what's good and what's not in that domain.
So I'll take a cue from what Tim said earlier. Are you doing anything so that you have a diverse portfolio, diverse people coming into the competition. I mean, too often we see images from Norway or Iceland or Scotland winning competitions for landscape, or Oregon for that matter. Is there any effort from you guys to have a more of a diverse segment of people coming in and posting in your competition?
I'll briefly say about the judging of a competition, and the way the judges are briefed is a really important element that is not looked at properly by a lot of people, because it's up to the organizers of a competition to brief the judges on what's important, to give them an idea of what they should be looking for, what they're prioritizing. Because without that, are they trying to, how do they know whether they're just choosing things that they like, or are they trying to choose what is observably the best, or what they think will be popular? So there's two aspects of that. One, we will be emphasizing originality, and that's in terms of composition and also location and style, for instance. And we'll making sure that judges understand that if you have two photographs that are, they think instinctively they're at a similar level. If one is from a new original location and one is from Patagonia of Cerro Torre, then the original location should get a priority. And likewise, there are certain compositional memes that are very popular. And if you've got a photograph that uses some novel composition that's quite interesting, then that should be prioritized. And that will not only happen in the first rounds, but also we're going to try and make sure the judges all get together on Zoom. I'm afraid we can't get together in person. And there will be a chairman there who will be trying to say, okay, let's have a think about this. If somebody likes a picture and it's not getting many votes, they will have a chance to defend it, to try and tell the other judges why they think it should do well. And quite often those conversations can change people's minds. And I think that's a really important part of it. Another aspect of that is that the judges can come back. So we're going to do it over a couple of days. So hopefully we'll get things honed down to a certain small set of pictures. And then we'll leave and come back and we'll ask the judges, okay, have you changed your minds over what you've seen? They've been living with the pictures for maybe a week or so beforehand, because they will have used Lightroom to look at all the pictures. And hopefully over that time, the big wow pictures might not have the same impact, and some of the more interesting, subtle pictures may be engaging the judges. So you really have to think about the psychological process of judging and manage that, and how people make decisions.
Can you talk us through this competition? How does it work? How do I enter my images? And what is the time frame? Can you talk us through that?
I mean, I can tackle it, and Tim, you can fill in if I miss anything. So first thing you're going to want to do is go to our website, naturallandscapeawards.com, and you can sign up for our mailing list. We will be emailing out discount codes for early bird entries. The way we've structured our entry fees is to, we want people, anyone who enters, to have a chance at winning the overall competition, which means we need to see at least 6 images. So that's the minimum number of images you can enter. Entries start on June 1st of this year, and they will be running through September 1st. And then we'll begin judging right away. We are in the final touches of piecing together our entry system so that it's captures all of the correct information and that we need in order to process your entries. And we will also be, after images make it through the first round of judging, we will be reaching out to people to obtain their raw files. So whether or not that's one raw file or multiple raw files, like for example, if you did some exposure blending to adjust for, having poor dynamic range, or if you did a panoramic, we would be requesting any and all raw files that were used for the final image. And yeah, that's hopefully that answers your question. Did I miss anything, Tim?
No, I think that's most of it. Yes, you get the images together, and then they will. One of the things we are doing that's a little bit different is most competitions I've had experience of use an online judging system for the judges. It's a web page, and they're very difficult to use and very slow. So if the judges are judging 20,000 pictures, and you're going to have to click forward on each page and then enter a score for it, it's very slow, and it doesn't give judges that much time to go backwards and forwards and seeing how things may work. So we're going from the very start, allowing people, all our judges, to use Lightroom. Most of us know how Lightroom works, and we can zip backwards and forwards and grade things, and that will help, I think, make the judging more consistent, let's say. Yeah.
So about the judging team, and I think you had judged International Landscape Photographer of the Year before, and I think you were still a judge in there, right? So
yes.
And being the judge there and then organizer here, do you see any kind of emotional conflict, potential conflict, or what is your opinion on that, or how do you kind of describe the relationship? Is it kind of very smooth?
Yeah, I before just as we had this idea for the competition, I got in touch with Peter Eastway about the International Landscape Photographer of the Year and said, I understand, we're starting a competition. I'll understand you probably don't want me to be a judge on the competition. It's been great working. And he said, don't be silly. We're doing different things. It's a different type of competition. It's a different type of judging. There's no reason why you can't be a judge on both. And I really respect that decision, because it is different. I mean, what we've said is we're not saying that one is better than the other. They are just different approaches. And I can appreciate, I mean, like Alex has said, we all the people in the competition who organized it have used some techniques that would not allow us to enter our own work in this competition. And that doesn't mean that we're wrong in any way. It's just a different way of working. And I can appreciate some of the pictures in the International Landscape Photographer of the Year. The way that you can use, for instance, focal length blending, and the way you can try and represent the landscape and interpret it using Photoshop and some tools. I do a little bit of that myself, and have done to a mild extent, and it works. So there's no doubt about it. Sometimes the camera doesn't see in the same way as our eye sees, so allowing people to interpret that is a very valid way. And I think, I'm not sure the name for it, where people are using deep sky images. Is that the new technique where
Deepscape?
It is deepscapes, yes. I mean, I went on a lady's website who was taking pictures, including elements of the deep sky. So say you're sitting on a mountaintop with a pair of binoculars and you're looking around and you're seeing the mountains. You're bringing all those elements together like a painter would. Nothing wrong with that at all. It's just a different way of working.
So what is the intention? What is the intention that you would ask people to submit their raw images so that you verify it? Or
correct.
Is that upfront, or is that only the shortlisted images?
Just the shortlisted images we're going to ask the raw files for. We did think about it might be a bit of a pain to try and get everybody to enter them. So, and also it would be a large number of files to be uploading. So yeah, we said it may be a few, let's say 500 final images maybe, or 800 or so, that we will be asking in the shortlist, depending on the number of entries we get.
Right.
And each of those raws, this is a job I've done for the Natural History Museum with a Wildlife Photographer of the Year for the last 10 years, going through and checking the raw files, checking against the submitted high resolution files to see how far away they are. Have they gone beyond the rules of the competition? And in many cases, it's difficult to draw a discrete line to say, yes, this is okay, no, this is bad. And so we do intend to pass quite a few of these borderline cases through to the judges to allow them to make the decision. because it's up to them to interpret what has gone too far in the eyes of the competition and what is okay. So that's going to be a fairly big job.
So just a quick description of what is going too far. If I remove my dust spots, that should be surely acceptable. And
yes, and even removing some transient images. So, for instance, let's say a photographer was standing in the landscape in front of you. They're only small in the picture, but you couldn't get rid of them. I'd say that was a borderline one. I'd say, you've not really deceived the viewer as to what you're representing in your photograph. Something that goes too far is if there's a tree in the middle of the picture that's getting in the way, taking that out would be going too far. And we tried to think about how to word this to say this is allowed, this is not allowed. And the real bottom line is to say, do not deceive the viewer. If the viewer of the pictures had a chance to see what you were photographing, and we're aware of photography, so they were happy with how wide angles worked and graduated filters. If they felt surprised and deceived at what the final picture looked like, then it's probably gone too far.
So using ND filters is okay? Absolutely
fine. Vignetting, color grading things. It's to do with the idea that if it's deceptive, and I'm loath to use the word deceptive because it implies intent by the photographer to deceive. But if a viewer could be deceived by it, so for instance, you've introduced a glow on the horizon that looks like the sun through doing post-processing, but it wasn't there, then that's a possibility that's gone too far. If the glow is green, then it's obviously not the sun. It may not have gone too far because it's just a stylized picture that you've decided to do using color grading. So there's no limit in terms of artistic intent. It's whether it's possibly deceiving the viewer and misrepresenting what's actually happening.
Yeah, and this is actually something that's come up quite a lot. And in fact, it's just as well Tim and I are separated by 500 miles because a few times I wanted to drive up to Glencoe and shake him around the neck because we were having an argument about what should and shouldn't be allowed. But I think to simplify things, we're basically not looking back to roll back the clock on photography. Okay, so there are a lot of things that are possible in photography now that have always been possible, and anything that was reasonably possible before, in terms of shooting with Velvia, for example, that creates more contrast and color in your images, and we're going to allow people to add saturation and contrast. Of course we are. Everybody does that kind of thing. But if you want to really simplify our rules down to the kinds of things that specifically we're disallowing, it tends to be around physical manipulation of the scene. So when you're warping the scene, when you're cloning things, when you're combining different images that are physically different, so we allow exposure bracketing, we allow panorama creation, but we don't allow you to take two different focal length shots and combine them. We don't allow you to take a shot at sunset and combine it with a night scene. So anything that's really combining physically different elements in the scene or removing physical elements in the scene, that's probably when you really need to have a proper look at our rules. But I think most photographers who are working with contrast and dodging and burning and vignetting and grads in the field and polarizers and all these kinds of processes that are part of the history of photography, you should be absolutely fine.
I was just going to say that, on our website under the rules, we have some pretty clear examples of the types of things that we're looking for people to avoid. I think Alex touched on most of them, but I think it's pretty clear in terms of the major ones that we're looking to avoid. And we even talk about the types of digital adjustments that are perfectly acceptable as well.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Himadri.
Yeah. So my question is, a lot of landscape photography awards, they restrict you from having human elements or humans in your frame or in your image. So what about this award?
question. We've talked about human like buildings and things. I've not talked about actual people or animals. I would say off the top of my head that the competition is primarily a landscape photography competition. If a small part of the picture includes a group of humans or animals, or a small part of the picture is the built landscape, so roads or buildings, then it wouldn't be a problem. If the main subject of the photograph is still the landscape photography, the landscape, then it's not a problem. So there's no real hard and fast rules there. But architecture wouldn't be included, for instance, I don't think. And if the pictures of a motorway, unless it's in the context of a landscape, that probably wouldn't be included. Again, it's difficult to come up with hard and fast rules there, but I think instinctively most people will understand the landscape photography, the natural landscape, as it were. That's another interpretation of natural there.
Right.
Yeah, and I think one thing to think about if you're including specifically people within your images is how including a person can really drive the narrative of a photo to the point that it becomes a portraiture image, even if the person is very small in the frame, because that completely changes the story of an image. So I think if you do include people specifically, you should certainly think about whether it's really a photo of the landscape or a photo of the people in the landscape, because we are obviously a landscape competition.
So if I understand you right, Alex, if I was adding a person just to show the scale of the mountain, that could be permissible? Is my understanding right?
We're not ruling out including buildings or people or anything like that. We're just looking for landscape photographs, and it's really hard to define what that might mean. I would say that if you're including figures in the landscape, I mean, it's popular, for example, to use figures in that way to show that mountains are gigantic. But if you have a silhouetted figure up against a mountain landscape, then suddenly you're saying, here is the person, and look how gigantic these mountains are. And it becomes a story about how small the person is in the context of the natural world, rather than a story about the landscape. So I just really think about how that image might be interpreted.
I think a good test there may be to say, if you took the person out of the image, would it still be the same image predominantly? And if it would be, then there's not a problem. If you take the picture out and it becomes a very different image.
I was just going to say, there's other ways that you could achieve a sense of scale as well by including something in your foreground or something else that can demonstrate scale. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a person.
Okay. Atanu?
Yeah,
you're muted, my friend.
I was just going to say that. So all of you have been like inspiration to many other photographers around the world, right? So I would be like, personally, I would be like really looking forward to see some of your works, which kind of people kind of idealize to prepare their work and enter the competition. So is it okay that if one of you guys or all of you guys one by one show off some of your work, share the story behind it, and how do you kind of think or approach the scene? That would be kind of really kind of standout thing which we all can kind of idealize for this award or something like that.
So Alex is actually busy putting together before and after images. Like we all are providing some of our images to Alex, and he goes to pretty strong critique from Alex. Actually, I love what he's doing for us, including beating me with a stick. So anyway, these video clips will be there on social media. I think one may be already out there, so that will give a fairly good idea about what is generally allowable. Generally what we would consider good for the competition.
I think our judges have given us quite a range of images as well, which we've been sharing on social media, so you can see what their work is like that fits the motifs of the competition as well, mostly. So if you keep your eye on the Facebook or Instagram channel, you'll see quite a lot of work that we like and the judges like.
So we talked a little bit about the judges that you've chosen for this competition. Can you tell us a little bit about how they were chosen, or what made you choose perhaps Mr. Cornish or Adam Gibbs. What was the thought process in choosing these judges?
You want me to tackle that, Tim?
Go ahead, Tim. Sorry, Matt.
Yeah.
So when we sat down as a team to look at the type of individuals that we wanted to judge the competition, we essentially came up with a list of criteria that was kind of the ideal mold of a judge for this particular competition. At the top of that list was somebody who kind of embodied and believed in the ethos of the competition. So in terms of having a body of work that is predominantly of a natural presentation of the landscape. And so right off the top, right there, we've eliminated a lot of people. And so after that, what we really wanted to do is we wanted to curate a list of individuals that we felt like the landscape photography community would respect and idealize and idolize, and that would command a lot of gravitas and legitimize the competition, to say, hey, this is a list of fabulous judges that that people look up to, and they look up to their work, and that we know that when they're looking at my image, that they're going to give it a serious look, and it's that they're actually able to do a good job of judging landscape images. And then thirdly, we really wanted to try to, just to be real and honest about marketing, we definitely had a level of import around our judges' abilities to reach an audience. So obviously we chose individuals that have clout in the community, that have a fan base, that have people that they're connected to, that they can help generate interest in the competition as well. We also spent a lot of time thinking and talking about trying to diversify our judging panel, and we felt like for the first year we did an okay job of that. We recognize that we have 2 women, and then we have no individuals of color. We're really looking in future years to expand our list of judges to include people of color as well. It's just for the first year, we were really just surprised to even get the judges we were able to get. And so we're, now that we've figured out, we can actually pull this off, I think we'll have a better job of recruiting a more diverse panel in the future. Anything you would add to that, Tim or Alex or Rajesh?
No, that's about it. Yeah.
I just wanted to add, we did try to see if we can find photographers from the Asia Pac region, from Africa, from South America, places that are generally underrepresented in landscape photography. And I must say it was really hard to come up with names of folks that fit our criteria. So that doesn't mean that we have given up on it. We just said for this competition for this year, we were not able to include those folks. So we are still welcome to ideas, any leads that we can get to judges in that.
Yeah, the fact is that in the Europe and North America region in particular, we have good contacts ourselves. So when we approach judges, they know who we are, and they know that we've got good intents in terms of the photographic community and so on. So it's easier for us to get judges from that group of people. But hopefully when the competition is established, people will recognize what the competition is and want to come on board as judges.
The other thing was, we were at the very start of the competition, we had no idea if it would be popular. And so we still wanted to make sure it would work. So everybody who's got involved at the bottom line has agreed to do it for nothing, just to make sure the competition works. Obviously, as soon as we get revenue coming in, the judges will get paid. None of us organizers are getting paid in the first year, just to make sure people don't think we're doing it for the money. But the judges will get paid. But trying to get judges to sign up to do a lot of work for nothing on a project that's new meant we had to really prioritize people we knew who trusted us in advance. And that's, it's a self-selecting audience. unfortunately. In future, if we know it's going to be popular, we don't need to choose judges that are have as much social reach, and we don't need to restrict ourselves to people we know we can twist their arm into doing it for nothing, potentially. So in the future, we'll have a lot more flexibility.
Okay, but this must need a lot of revenue for your marketing and your advertising, and so I assume the promoters are putting in that seed capital. Is that how it works?
Well, as it turns out, if you're willing to work for free, you can get a lot done for nothing. So that's been the basis of the competition initially.
We're quite lucky that we've got some skills between us. So the website's been built by ourselves, the design of the logos by Alex. I'm writing the software for the submission system. Matt knows social media, etc. We've both been able to chip in a bit of money just to get things going for bits of software, etc., and a little bit of ad budget. So yeah, we managed to get quite a long way without having any revenue. But we've got potential supporters, big brands that might be able to help out in prizes or in other ways, perhaps. And hopefully the revenue from the submissions itself will cover a lot of the prize, and also the book. I mean, the book shouldn't be minimized. It's going to cost maybe £25,000 or more when we include distribution. But if all goes well, we may be able to give a book to all of the commended photographers in the competition. And that's our goal, is to try and make it so that people take part, really get something worthwhile out of it, regardless of whether they're winning or not.
And I would say, in a perfect world, if we have lots and lots of people enter the competition, I think we're all committed, based on our budget, to be able to give that fine art book to, certain levels of people who have entered as well. So, we really want to do this for the community. We want to, again, like Tim was saying earlier, the more entries we get, the more we can curate and really have kind of cream of the crop in this book, and not just be a book with images with no storytelling. It's going to be a lot more in depth than that, and we would love to give it to the people that have helped get this thing off the ground with us in partnership.
Yeah, you
heard the man, guys. I think it's worthwhile just to get that book, enter this competition just to get that book. I mean, it's a no-brainer completely.
Yeah, I mean, like that's definitely a big difference compared to other competitions. Like a lot of competitions do ebooks, for example, and that's pretty much it. But we really are trying to get this fine art book, real physical book that you can hold and have it on your coffee table and be proud of, especially.
Wonderful thought. Atanu.
Yeah, I was just asking that, this is very surprising, and this is due to the on continuation of the previous question, that how Mother Nature is kind of very selective on giving very specific things. Like, for an example, Mother Nature gave like nice landscape only to Europe or North America, or it seems like that, right? And the wildlife to Africa and India, right? So that's kind of very, very surprising. And that's probably one of the main reasons that why the big names of photography, or even the judges, right, are only from these selected regions, right? So I was just saying that it must be hard to find judges even in future that, from Africa, let's say, for an example, or maybe even from, India, probably, it will be hard to find more judges there, right? Because the lack of natural landscapes there, even there's Himalaya and, and all true, but it has its own challenges.
I was not completely on board with you, Atanu, there, because the landscape in India, we've got such a varied landscape here. We've got the mountains in the north, we've got the northeast, and we have all the beaches in the world. We have all the seascapes in the world. So
the
not completely on board.
We have a desert as well.
We have a desert.
Yeah, I think the answer to that question is actually a lot more simple, and that's just that America and Europe has a lot of rich people. It really is that, as far as I'm concerned, and particularly historically wealthy people. So we have a long tradition of photography and art, for example. I think the reality is, in many developing nations, people have got more important things to do than take photographs when they're trying to get through their day-to-day lives. So I think it comes from privilege, and unfortunately, photography to a certain extent. So it does make it harder to find entrants, but also find judges from less privileged backgrounds, and from those countries which also don't have a direct connection through the social media channels and so on that would lead them into this community. So there's a few reasons there, but hopefully we can unpick that puzzle.
Yeah. So to add to that, there are some phenomenal photographers out of China, out of Korea, Japan, Thailand, for example, right? So it's not like they're not there, but do they fit the mold for our competition? Or are they going to be a good ambassador for our competition? Like, does their work represent what we want to promote? That's the part that we were having trouble with. There are phenomenal photographers out there. Yeah.
Well, and one thing we had discussed as organizers as well is trying to find a way to finance or grant people from lower socioeconomic status to be able to enter the competition at a reduced price or even for free. And I think that type of funding mechanism is something that we're excited to give a go once we can establish the competition as something that can be self-funded year in and year out. And but that's only possible if we have people that enter, and if we have potentially some corporate sponsorships, or even down the road maybe some grants. But typically corporate sponsors and grant funders are not usually excited to help out in the first year of something like this. So that's why this very first year is really important for us to really showcase that we can pull this off, that there's an interest in it, and that that it's it's going to work. So we're excited to see what we can do to help out those individuals as well. To your point about beautiful landscapes in different parts of the world, I don't know if you've ever been to Kansas. It's not that exciting of a place, but I got to tell you, there's a film photographer named Michael Strickland who posted a photo yesterday from an 8x10 that absolutely blew my mind. And it's a snow-covered tree at sunrise in Kansas, and it was beautiful.
Behind me, this is Texas, and Texas is not this beautiful all the time. It's just like you have to pick the best time of the year,
Okay, guys. Well, I think I speak for all of us that we are quite excited about this competition, and we are looking forward to this competition. I think it opens up a lot of doors for a lot of photographers, new photographers, and different kind of photographers. And I think we are looking forward to this one. Really looking forward to this one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And
Hey,
thank you for taking the time to speak to us and explaining how this works. And we love the transparency. We love the openness and the honesty behind this thought. And best of luck to you, all of you guys.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. Thank you.
Any closing words from you, Tim, Alex, Rajesh, Matt?
No, just thank you very much for having us on the program.
One thing that is dear to my heart is the youth photographer category. So that's one area that has been fairly underrepresented in most competitions. So we try to correct that. So the more young people get involved, we need to encourage the next generation to learn photography, to follow through with the traditions that we are trying to promote. So that's one thing that if you guys can tell your young photographer in your family or friends, that would be great.
Great idea. What a great idea. Okay.
Than's very much, guys.
Thanks very much, guys.
Hey, do you want to take a screenshot?
Yes, that would be great. Who's going to do that? Atanu, are you going to do that? Okay. Okay, thank you guys. Have a good evening, good night,
Okay.
or a good morning.
All right. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Cheers.
Bye bye, everyone. Stay safe.
Bye. And apologies for our glitch.
Oh, no problem. We understand technology.
Bye-bye.
Bye.